Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Jimmy Palumbo Show, show number 171, coming to you live. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome here, Tuesday at 1 o'clock. That's right. Jimmy Palumbo Show, show number 171. I can't believe I've done 171 of these filthy whores. I can't believe I'm still doing this show. And this, of course, at show number 171, it is the Venditti part of the show. One Stacy Dillard, one Dave Tollefson. You may remember that name. Mm-hmm. Also, Dave, you should know this, one Ian Hamilton, who was number 71 in the Yankees. Remember him? Another shitty pitcher. And we are here live, of course, behind the glass, your friend and mine, Mr. Media Capital of the World of Central Jersey. He is a huge golf fan, a wrestling fan, a Yankee fan, a Knick fan. He is everything involved in Matawan, including his gorgeous home studios. I get to look straight through that back door. I don't see the tricycle. I don't see the bucket of water. I don't see any of your children.
I did some spring cleaning to make sure there was no extracurriculars. But what's up, Jimmy? How are we today?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Dave Sturgio here at Shea from the Omni. Dave, how are we doing?
I'm good, man. Just fresh off my my road trip to Connecticut. Saw the Travelers Championship. Very excited. Big golf guy now, by the way.
Okay, so. First of all, we're going to get more to my Montauk trip in a second, and we're going to tie in the golf thing. But I had shitty TV coverage there. And all of a sudden, I see the golf things on, and I'm like, my boy Sturch is there with his brother and dad and all that shit. And then I shut it off, and next thing you know, I'm getting ESPN alerts. There's terrorism going on in the 18th hole. I'm saying to myself, if Dave Sturgio was caught up in a terrorist act with his father and his brother, I was like, I know those three will survive. I don't know. It's like the terrorists.
It was pretty crazy. I'm not going to get into the nook and crannies as to why these people decided to run onto the field, but it was the 18th hole. They were about to sink the game-winning putt, and all of a sudden,
you were at the 18th.
I was at the 18th. Listen to this, Jimmy. I got video of it. At the very end, the conclusion, they've already gotten tackled down and they're being arrested and stuff. I put that video on my Twitter account, and my buddy texted me and he's like, "Hey, your tweet's about to go nuclear." I said, "What?" Dude, Yahoo Sports picked it up and credited me for the video, and all of a sudden my Twitter's blowing up, and I was like, "Oh, all right, well." As dumb as this entire thing was,
it was good for Dave Sturgio. It's bad for golf.
He's got more followers now.
Well, I will tell you, you're supposed to send that information to the cops. Did you see that? I saw somewhere that you're supposed to send videos in for legal cases, which you're not going to do because you're a jerk.
No, I'm not going to.
But anyway, we're going to get to that in specifics. I just think it's great that you went. And of course, at the top of the show, we do a thing called the baseball card. Those of you just tuning in, because we have a very special guest today. We got Jeff Gurian coming up, and he's a lot of fun. We're going to bust his balls. And I have a special card here. Dave, this guy is just a huge player. His name is Matt DeSalvo. Okay, let me tell you something about old Matty here. Matty played 2 years. He's 43 years old. He played in 2007, 2008. He was 1-3 with a 7.89 ERA, so he'd be making around $8 million a year today. He played in 9 games, 6 starts. Now, in 2007 for the Yankees, and don't ask me why I remember this, maybe he's Italian last name, his first start with the Yankees, and if it happened now, me and you would be World Series is a lock. 7 innings, 3 hits for the rookie, right? We would have been all over that today if a guy pitched to Jim. But he lost his control. That'll do it here from the Omni. And in 2008, he ended up with Atlanta, 6 games, and this is where he really shined. 2 games, 2 innings pitched, 11 hits, 7 runs.
Was he Rick Ankiel?
And then he got signed by the Mets, released, signed by the Diamondbacks, released. You see it, signed, released, signed, released.
DFA'd a bunch of times.
But yeah, a bunch of times. But here's the crazy thing about this. He has first of all, he has all these he pitched Division III. Okay. He has a Division III record in wins and Ks in a season, but actually 53 wins is the NCAA record. That's a lot of wins for a college pitcher. Think about it. Usually, if you're that good, you lead. He also has the most career strikeouts, 603 college strikeouts. Think about that for a second. It's not like Major League Baseball here. And he became a pitching coach. But here's the thing that cracked me up when I did my research.
Wait, that's even the funnier part. Okay. Like he barely has a cup of coffee in the majors, and now he's a pitching coach.
Right, but here's the best thing. It said that he's an avid reader. He owns 400 books, and it said, and he's read 200 of them. And I'm like, wait a minute. I've easily read 200 books in my life. I'm like, I am now the Jimmy Palumbo podcast. One of the things, the selling point is going to be he's an avid reader here at Shea. That's all I got on the guy. He a cup of coffee in some other organizations coaching, but now he teaches one of those pitching seminar things, where you go there and spend 10 grand for your kid to, walk guys. That's what
I got a way better player or more recognizable player this week. And it's kind of weird because I just grabbed this card. I did the Jimmy Palumbo and I grabbed it off the top and I didn't care who it was. Sometimes I'll go through and if they have no story, it's hard to do. But anyway, everybody knows of him from doing this. No. And that is Mr. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Oh, what's his name? The center, the Tembo.
Dikembe Mutombo.
Dikembe Mutombo. I still love that.
This right here, coincidentally enough, is his Georgetown card, right? But the funny part about this is right behind the card, it had this official certificate of authenticity. And I'm like, what is that? So I don't even know. Remember, this box was like given to me by somebody. I forget who it was. But apparently this card and this 15 card front row set was only made 20,000 of them. And this is number 9,674. So
I
limited edition shit.
And it's worth $1.85. So
worth the cardboard that it's printed on. But yeah, Dikembe Mutombo, a terrorist for the Atlanta Hawks, as far as I'm remembering him.
He was a good player. He was a flawed player, but he was good. I used to love him.
He was a very good defender.
Very good defensive player, yes, I remember him well. All right, well, Matt DeSalvo and Dikembe, that was all part of that Georgetown connection there. So that's it. Now, before we get to our guests, Patreon, we are just locked in at Mariano Rivera 42. Fans, you're not finding out Dave is drinking some shitty thing right now while I do my bit. We do not have a Spider Lockhart. Venditti just drove off the road again. He's still laughing at Stacy Dillard. Steve, if you're listening, I know you're crying right now. And also, I also have to give a shout out, which I'm going to talk about later in the show. Pat Volkemer, I have to make sure that he drives off the side of the road. He actually enjoys this show and he laughs at the stupid stuff we say. And Pat Volkemer is Chop Sports all-time compiler.
He's basically royalty at this point.
Yeah, what he is.
For all the wrong reasons.
Chop Sports has a Facebook page that's very successful, current sports stuff. I think it's pretty good. But I only laugh. They don't have anybody to go on from midnight to 8 a.m. So Dave
Volkemer's the schmooze.
Yeah, he is the schmoozer. Dave called me up and said, listen, Jimmy, can Pat just post nonstop between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m.? I was like, yeah, but he's got to respond to his own posts.
Oh, that's when I know he's either in the bag. He's either when he responds to his own posts, he's either in the bag or he's a complete psycho. Like either way, it's
he doesn't sleep well. He wakes up and he thinks about who hit the most triples. Yeah, sometimes he'll put in like which guy had the most triples in the seventh inning from 1968 to 74. Like
and then he'll put that out. He'll put that out there as a question like trivia, but before anybody can even Google, he's like, "Here's the answer." Wait,
so Pat, we're going to get more to Pat Volkemer later on in the show. We love you. If you're listening, I know he's driving off the road right now. He just wants to hear his name. Pat Volkemer from Los Angeles. All right. Like I said, we're stuck at 42. We need more Patreons here at Shea. Some of it's like inflation, Dave Sturchio's prices go up. The prices of bread and eggs go up. I love getting that little text from Dave Sturchio every Friday here at Shea. I wouldn't get paid. Hey, listen, you get your money right away, though, Dave. I'm like some other people getting involved there. It's throw under the bus day here from the Omni. But that's it. Now, I have a very special guest coming on. Okay. This guy, okay. Let me just get my paperwork here because he's got.
This is an elaborate research.
First of all,
my man has done everything.
Well, okay. This is my introduction to Mr. Jeff Gurian. Now, a lot of comics that I ran into over the years, you run into them backstage, and they're like, "Oh, I'm a lawyer and I do comedy now," and it turns out they're like decent at being a lawyer, and they're at best decent at being a comic. Or whatever industry they say what they do for a living, it's like they're kind of shitty at both or average at both. And then this guy who I did stand up with, he was a dentist, but he was like a good dentist and a successful one. And then he was a successful stand-up, a successful writer. And for guys like maybe you haven't heard of, guys like, Rodney Dangerfield and Joan Rivers and Dice Clay. And then he writes books. And the books are successful. And this guy, he's like producing TV shows. And whatever this guy does, he plays well. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, your friend and mine, Mr. Jeff Gurian. How we doing, buddy? What's going on?
Doing great, Jimmy. It's great to be on with you guys. And thanks for that introduction. After an introduction like that, I better be good.
No, listen, on our show, you can still suck and we'll love you anyway. You know how that goes. Now, I did a show with Jeff way up. Remember we at the winery up in upstate New York, and you were. It was like I think it was a hot night, and you were complaining about the heat, the drive, the traffic. This guy walks in. I'm like, who is this jerk off complaining about everything? And then he proceeded to kick ass on stage, which I loved. I never saw you perform up to that point. And of course, I couldn't wait for him to see me because he's been around stand up, for a long time. And he texted me, "Oh, I was well on the throughway in the middle of your set." So Jeff came in, killed it, and then he was in his car on the way home. But he told me
it was such a strange venue, by the way. It was like really dark, hard to find.
Yeah.
The guy that booked us was a mutual friend of ours, and it was a weird space. I'm not a good traveler, Jimmy.
Yeah,
traveling is real hard. I got the ADHD. I get lost easily. I get nervous. So I always challenge myself. In 2019, I made myself go to Japan all by myself because it was the scariest thing I could think of to do. Because my whole life I've been confronting fear.
Wow.
A lot of people let fear stop them. And I actually wrote a book about fear. So I never let fear stop me. And I do shit that makes me uncomfortable. By the way, I didn't ask you about the language. Are we allowed to curse?
You do whatever you want. You want. I
usually, but one slipped out.
No, you can't. Listen, that's another funny thing about Jeff. Not only does he write like the comedy bullshit, he writes like happiness books and how to get better. I'm like, I feel like there's in the library, there's probably a guide to plumbing or HVAC work written by Jeff Gurian. Like, this guy's writing about shit. I don't even know what he's talking. It's unbelievable. I have trouble writing a note to the doctor. Unbelievable.
I wound up with 8 books. I never thought I'd have one book. 5 of my books are on comedy. One's with Chris Rock. I did the history of the comic strip where Eddie Murphy started and Seinfeld started.
That's
but my
the book.
Pardon me?
That's the book I want to read, the comic strip, because me and Artie Lang started out there many moons ago.
Yeah, it's called Make 'Em Laugh. Me and Richie Tinkin worked on that together. It took 4 years to do that book, which was crazy. It took 3 years to get all the interviews. Like with Seinfeld, it took months. Even though he wanted to do it, his schedule was so crazy that it took months to get him to be able to come in. And Ray Romano's in it, and Colin Quinn, and Lisa Lampanelli. Every big star that came out of the club is in the book.
Right.
So it took 3 years to write it, and then a year to edit it, because I wound up with 500 pages, and the editor the publisher only wanted 250. So we had to eliminate. You know how hard that was to take out gold from people like Billy Crystal and
Now I don't feel bad, because had you interviewed me about the comic strip, I definitely would have been part of the 250 that was cut. I assure you.
Don't worry about the length of time it takes to edit. We're used to that.
We're used to. Well,
it was really crazy. But it's my last 3 books that are the most meaningful to me, because I wrote books on happiness, mindset, and changing negative thinking to positive thinking, because I was a very severe stutterer. I started stuttering when I was 6 or 7 years old, and I stuttered through my 20s and beyond, even into my 30s. I was blocking on certain words. And I realized one day that I didn't stutter when I was alone. I only stuttered when I was trying to talk to somebody else, which told me, I consider it grace, really, that there was really nothing wrong with me. You can't have a disability based on your location, right? A man with a limp limps in every room of his house. He can't go into a room and close the door and walk perfectly. But if I could go by myself and say everything that I couldn't say perfectly, then theoretically it means there's nothing wrong with me. I could never say Gurian. I could never say my last name. Most stutterers can't say their own name. And as an avocation, because it took me years to cure myself. And as an avocation, I now work with stutterers all over the world. And I teach them how not to stutter, because it has to do with thought. And I'm fascinated by thought, Jimmy and Dave. I'm fascinated by the fact that we are holding thoughts. All of us are holding thoughts that are not valid for us. And that's where the fear came from. My subconscious mind told me that I needed to stutter for people, that I needed to hold myself back and self-sabotage myself. And I had to learn to reject that. I'm literally arguing with my own mind. So my mind tells me, don't travel, you're going to get lost, you'll never be successful. Good things.
Did your mind tell you not to do this podcast?
No, my mind told me to do it because I thought you were a good guy. Because I didn't hear your whole set. I heard part of your set.
I know. I'm just busting you. I was fascinated by but you know what? Hang on a second. Okay. You got all these cool books. And the stuttering thing and the happiness book. But I really want to. I really want to talk about. So you were a dentist, a cosmetic dentistry, and you were fairly successful at that. I know you speak at certain things, but when did you realize? Was it a combination of why you were going to dental school? You were up on stage at comedy clubs, or was it like you were just busting balls at the office? You were the funny dentist, and then hey, you know what? Let me go on stage for 5 minutes, see if I can do that. How did that all occur?
Neither of those scenarios are accurate. It's interesting. Yeah, I was not a funny dentist. My patients used to say, "Are you really in comedy?" Because I was so serious. Because I was a cosmetic specialist, and I spent 12 years at NYU as a clinical professor in oral medicine and orofacial pain. And my specialty was taking away headaches that are caused by grinding your teeth when you sleep, bruxism, TMJ problems. As a matter of fact, next month on July 18th, I'm actually the keynote speaker at the Minneapolis Convention Center for the Academy of General Dentistry's 2020 annual convention. I'm still connected to the field by lecturing. I don't.
You don't do any comedy when you talk, do you?
Well, I make it humorous. I'm a motivational speaker, so I have no choice but to make things funny. But I don't. It's not going to be like joke telling. I'll probably do a couple of lines about Minnesota because I've never been to Minnesota, and surprisingly, the title of the talk is "How to Survive a Career in Dentistry Using Positive Thinking and Humor."
Okay.
So I use humor in whatever I do. I had a heart attack in 2015, and it came out of nowhere. I had this, what they call a widowmaker heart attack, right?
Oh, because you're in shape. Oh my God, if you have a heart attack, me and Dave will be gone by the end of the show.
It came out of nowhere, Jimmy. I had never been sick in my life. The night before, I was with the Sirius XM people. We were celebrating. I was a regular on Sirius XM with Ron Bennington for a couple of years. And I used to bring on celebrity guests that were friends of mine, like Kevin Hart and D.L. Hughley, and Colin Quinn was my first guest. And I brought on
Colin.
Yes. So we were partying. The next day, out of nowhere, I get this like weird feeling in my chest, and I'm rubbing it, and it goes away. And I'm thinking to myself, it can't be a heart attack. You can't rub away a heart attack. And it's pouring rain, and I have an appointment with a chiropractor for my first appointment. And I think to myself, you know what? I'll go to the chiropractor, and he'll take away whatever this is, because I was working out a lot, and I thought maybe I strained the muscle in my chest because I wasn't getting any of the symptoms that they tell you that you're having when you have a heart attack. There was no pressure on my chest, not like an elephant on my chest. I wasn't sweating, I wasn't nauseous, nothing. But it was pouring rain. and I almost decided not to go. I don't like to go out in the rain because of my hair. As stupid as that sounds, it's the truth.
Well, you certainly look adorable.
Well, thank you, Jimmy. So anyway, I decided that I was going to go. I go out and I get on the subway and the pain's getting worse. And I'm rubbing like a lunatic and it feels better, but then it keeps coming back. So I get out of the subway and I have to walk about 6 blocks. And something, I don't know what it was, something made me turn down 50th Street towards Radio Center where Jimmy Fallon show is. And there's a reason I say that. And there was a police van. I stopped this police van. I walked over and I knocked on the window and I said, I'm sorry to bother you, but I think I'm having a heart attack. Now, it's very awkward to tell someone you're thinking you're having a heart attack. It's kind of embarrassing because what if you're not? You know, it's like a weird thing to stop somebody and tell them you think you're having a heart attack. So the cop opens the window and he says, well, we're stuck in traffic. It'll probably be faster if you walk. Well, first he says, first he says to me, I think you should go to the hospital. And I said, well, that's why I'm telling you. I'm not just telling everyone. I'm telling you. I thought they'd jump in and they'd turn on the siren and drive me to the hospital. But then he says to me, no, he goes, we're stuck in traffic. It'll probably be faster if you walk. So I said, well, where's the nearest hospital? And he didn't know. He takes out his phone and he starts looking for hospitals. And he says to me, do you have Google Maps? And I'm like, no. He goes, well, I think you should download Google Maps. And I'm like, my life is a Woody Allen movie. This is ridiculous. I think I'm having a heart attack. He's telling me to download Google Maps. So I said, so I walked away. I said, thanks anyway, but I could only get another half a block because the pain was getting pretty intense. So there's another cop on 6th Avenue and 50th Street, and he's on a walkie-talkie. And I do the same thing. I'm sorry to bother you. I think I'm having a heart attack. He says to me, stand on the side over here. So I stand there. I'm waiting a couple of minutes. I said to them, are they coming? He's like, I'm sorry, I didn't call them yet. No one was too upset that I was having a heart attack. And the reason that I thought about afterwards, Jimmy, I was very calm. I've been studying spirituality for 30 years. And I was saying to myself, if this is really a heart attack, I don't know, it's really weird, but this is my path and I can't do anything about it. And I stayed very, very calm. I think most people having a heart attack, they might be like yelling and whatever. I think that's why nobody took it seriously. So a fire truck shows up, right? And 4 or 5 firemen get off the truck and they say, who's the patient? And I said, me. And the guy goes, well, climb up on the truck. I'm like, seriously? Because now we're just fucking with you like that. Everyone was joking around, Jimmy and Dave. So finally an ambulance came and 2 guys get out who think it's hilarious that both their names are Mike. They finally take me in the ambulance. And they're asking me ridiculous questions, like a medical history. And I had to say to them, listen, I'm a doctor. I know you can ask me this while we're driving. You don't have to do the medical history while we're here. But they insisted they had to do it while we were there. And they were asking ridiculous questions like, did you ever have an uncle that felt nauseous? I'm like, what, are you kidding me? So they finally start driving me to the hospital and they don't put the siren on. And I'm like, why aren't you using the siren? They're like, because we're not convinced you're having a heart attack. It turns out I was having a heart attack that doesn't show on an EKG. Leave it to me to be unique. I had to have the kind of heart attack that you can't readily see. So they're driving me to the hospital in the pouring rain and they're stopping at every light. They're stopping at every light, right? They finally get me to the hospital and they can't get me in. The door won't open. It's supposed to open automatically when you bring the stretcher. And I'm like, my life is ridiculous. They can't even get me into the. So they finally get me in and I lay there for 9 hours. Fortunately, some genius put me on blood thinners and that saved my life. And the next day they come to my room and they say, you were 95% blocked. Anyway. Wow.
That's a lot.
It's really a lot. They put in a stent and I was joking with the surgeon on the operating table. I said to the surgeon, I wasn't completely asleep and I felt them unplugging my heart. And I said to the surgeon, I feel you in my heart, not in a romantic way, but I feel you in my heart. And the whole surgical team started to laugh. And he came to my room later and he hugged me. He said, I want you to know you're a miracle. And I said,
Wow.
you're the miracle. You're the guy that figured out how to save me. He said, no one has ever joked with me on the operating table before. Never had a patient that told jokes while I was operating on his heart. And I was back on stage. I was back on stage 5 days later, Jimmy. And
There you go.
the owner of New York Comedy Club said to me, "What, are you crazy? You just had a heart attack." I was like, "Yeah, but it's hard to get a spot here. I don't want to lose my spot." So, only a comedian could get the insanity of that, right?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I'm sure your hair looked good the whole time during this whole experience.
Sure. When I was in the hospital with COVID, March of 2020, I went. I'm a trendsetter. I went right out and got COVID. I don't want to wait. I got it in the night before I got sick. You'll appreciate this. I'm at Gotham Comedy Club. I'm sitting with Chris Mazzilli, the owner, Michael Yo, who is the headliner, and the guy they call Jimmy Big Balls, Jimmy Cannizzaro, who used to be married to Lisa Lampanelli. She called him Jimmy Big Balls. The four of us are sitting there, and they're shooting me for a documentary that they were making about me. The next day, all three of us wind up in the hospital. Me, Michael Yo, and Jimmy was on a ventilator because he was a huge guy. We all wound up in the hospital. Thank goodness Chris didn't get sick. But I was sick. I was in the hospital. They kept me for 4 days. They used hydroxychloroquine on me, which saved me. I always like to say that. Before they politicized the drug, they could have saved thousands of people by using that drug. I had put myself on Z-Pak because as a doctor, I always keep antibiotics in the house. And on the third day of COVID, it went to my throat. And as soon as I get sick, I get a sore throat. I started myself on Z-Pak, not knowing that they were using that in the hospital to keep people breathing. And my kids would call me and they'd say, "Dad, can you breathe?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I can still breathe." And like, maybe it's not COVID. And you're supposed to stay on Z-Pak for 5 days. And I had enough for 10 days. But after 2 weeks, my symptoms were so bad. I was in so much pain. I was never that sick in my life. I had to call an ambulance. And I was so nervous to call an ambulance because in my insanity, I started thinking, what do you wear to go to the hospital?
Or maybe the fire department would come.
I couldn't figure out what to wear. I knew I had to pack a bag. And then I'm like, I was very confused because I was so sick. I had a fever. I was nauseous 24/7. By the time I called the ambulance, my nose was bleeding. I couldn't stop the bleeding. And when I called 911, they wouldn't send an ambulance right away. They had to interview me because they were running out of ambulances. They ran out of hospital rooms. So when I told them my symptoms, they came. 2 men in hazmat suits came. And I said, "I'm leaving my door open in case I don't have the strength to open the door." They came to my house, and it was the first example of kindness. And I like to talk about this because kindness is so important to people. One of the ambulance guys took my hand and he said to me, "Don't worry, you're going to make it. You're going to be okay." He said, because I got up on the stretcher by myself. He said, everybody else I've taken to the hospital needed to be carried. And he was amazed that I could get on the stretcher myself. And when they got me to the hospital, they wheeled me into the emergency room and they put me in a cubicle next to a woman who was screaming. And I'm not exaggerating. She was screaming with every breath that she took. And I had to step outside myself because I asked them if they could move me because I was so sick. I couldn't bear to hear somebody screaming literally with every breath. And they said there was no place else to put me. They were out of room.
Was she watching a Giant game or?
Yeah. I don't know what she was watching, but she was screaming. And I said to myself, listen, I had to do what I write about in my books, Jimmy. I had to step outside myself. There's a tendency to think, why me when these things happen, right?
Oh, yeah. I do that every time I start the show.
Well, okay, the spiritual answer is, why not me? Whoever promised me that my life is supposed to be perfect, right? That nothing was ever supposed to happen to me. So I had to start thinking about her, about how much pain she must be in or how scared she must be. And they almost were going to send me home. And a pulmonary specialist came to see me. He said, "I just x-rayed your lungs. I'm sorry to tell you, you have COVID double pneumonia, and we're going to keep you." He said, and they cleared out the cancer ward, and they made a ward just for COVID patients. And they put me in this room that was so amazing. And I took a video of myself. On the second day, they started me on hydroxychloroquine. The first day, they just covered me in ice to bring down my fever. And because I had put myself on Z-Pak, they didn't have to give me any more. But on the second day, they gave me a double dose of hydroxychloroquine and a double dose at night. And by the next day, I was feeling different already. And by the fourth day, they had stabilized my oxygen enough to send me home. And I'm grateful that you let me tell that story, because I want people to know that hydroxychloroquine works.
Yeah.
And it could have saved thousands of people.
I do know the guy who replaced you that night at the comic strip killed. Did 8 minutes. It was really awesome. All right. So wait a minute. So also, I find you fascinating. First of all, when you started writing for other comedians, were you joke writing?
I never answered your question. When I was 12 years old, I decided I wanted to be a dentist. I wanted to be a doctor, but I was too sensitive. I knew already. I was a very, very sensitive kid. I'm an empath. I didn't know that in those days, which means that if I'm with you and you're sad, I was sadder for you than you were. I overfelt feelings, if you can relate to. Most men don't like to talk about sensitive because it sounds like it's not masculine. But if you're a doctor, it's good to be sensitive because it makes you empathetic to your patients. So I never hurt my patients. I geared myself. You know, people are so afraid to go to the dentist. So I developed painless techniques of giving injections, and I would take away headaches just using my hands, just using the energy of my hands, which is what I used to lecture on at NYU. So when I'm 12 years old, I decided I wanted to be a dentist because you don't have to worry about people dying. I knew I couldn't handle life and death situations, and I was already writing comedy. In my junior year of dental school, I met Woody Allen, and Woody Allen was nice enough to sit with me and read.
How the hell did you meet Woody Allen?
I contrived this way. I was sending him. It's a crazy story. I'm going to be telling this in Minneapolis. I related so much to his comedy, and everyone says what you write is like Woody Allen. So I decided I needed to meet him. And he was starring in a show called Play It Again, Sam at the time with Tony Roberts. And I was a junior in dental school, and I had no money. And on the occasion when I would come to New York, when I could save up enough money to take a train to New York for the weekend, I would leave Woody notes on my dental school cards as if I knew him. And I said, Woody, it's Jeffrey, and I'm coming to see the show soon. And I would say strange things like, I'm bringing my cardboard thumb. I said ridiculous things because his comedy was very absurd. If you remember him on the Ed Sullivan Show, he would say stuff like, I was walking down the street and a maniac threw a Bible out of a window. And luckily, I had a bullet in my breast pocket. And the Bible hit the bullet. If it wasn't for that bullet, the Bible would have pierced my heart. I remember that since I'm a little kid, watching him on the Ed Sullivan Show. So I knew I had to meet Woody. So I kept sending him these notes over a period of months. Woody, I'm coming to the show and all. And finally, I get enough money to buy tickets for the show. And I didn't have the courage to go alone. And I knew the only way to impress a star that you're sane, because you have to show that you're sane, because men are not going to the theater hoping to meet other men, right? In general, they're not. So I knew there's only two ways to show someone you're sane. You either wear a tie or you bring a pretty girl with you. And I didn't have a tie, and I only knew one pretty girl, and she hated me because we had just broken up. But I begged her to come. She knew my dream was to meet Woody Allen, so she agreed to come with me. So we get to the theater. I leave my last note. Woody, I'm here. I leave it with the stage manager. We go to, and I said, I'll be back during intermission. I didn't even know you don't bother people during intermission. You wait till the end of the show. But I didn't know. I was a kid. I was like 22 years old, right? So intermission comes, and I'm really nervous. And she goes, you can't back out. You have to do this because I came with you. So I go backstage, and the stage manager is not in his seat. And I grab her hand, and I run up the stairs, but I wound up on the roof. So I come back down. Stage manager's there. He says to me, can I help you? And I said, yes, Woody is expecting me. He says, go right in. There's no terrorism in those days, guys. There was no security. You just walk. He says, go right in. So I go to Woody's dressing room, and it's empty. He's in Tony Roberts' dressing room with the whole cast. And They animated this. There's a documentary about me that was made in 2020. It's called "Who the Fuck is Jeffrey Gurian?" And they took this story and they animated my
It's
meeting.
so funny. Some of my fans were probably wondering the same thing.
Everyone says the same thing. John Mulaney said, if you see somebody at a comedy show and you're like, who the fuck is that? That's probably Jeffrey Gurian. So it's in the documentary. So I get to meet Woody, and he reads and he says to me, listen, and I said ridiculous things to him. I said, listen, let's open up a day camp and throw winter clothes at people, and let's walk low like we used to in Europe. And he looks at the girl I'm with. He goes, "This guy's a fucking nut." Just like, and I realized I was too excited. You know, like when you're a kid and you meet your idol. Like you guys are sports fans. I don't even know who to use as an excuse.
Well, that's how Dave was when he met me.
Yeah, exactly. Right? You get overexcited. So he says to me, "Listen," he said, "I'm in the middle of a show. You think you can come back tomorrow night?" And I said, "No, I'm much too busy." No, I said, "Of course I'll come back tomorrow night." Years later, I got friendly with Jack Rollins, who was Woody Allen's manager, and he managed Robin Williams and Billy Crystal. He actually wanted Billy to play me in a sitcom about a dentist who wanted to be in show business. And that's how I met Billy and Robin. And I told him this story about Woody. I went back the next night. Woody sat with me for an hour in his dressing room, and he read all of my material. My dream was that he was going to say, "Jeffrey, we need to do movies together." He didn't say that. He said to me, "Your comedy is very visual, and you should think of making a film out of it," which I did. A few years later, I made a film that was called the Men Who series, about men who do very unusual things, like men who take a pitchfork to the movies, men who enjoy Latin dancing with tools. Like I had a guy who does the tango with a wrench. Peter Dinklage, the great star from Game of Thrones, wound up in that film as men who dance where they're not supposed to.
Is that on? Can you get that on YouTube? Is it available? Is it out there?
Comedy Matters TV channel. You can see it if you look up the Men Who series on the it's comedymatterstv.com on YouTube. Okay. I have over 600 videos with everybody, and Peter Dinklage is in.
I did not know that.
And it debuted at Caroline's Comedy Club as part of the Toyota Comedy Festival, and that was because Woody Allen gave me my inspiration, and he encouraged me to make films, and that's what I did. So I didn't perform for many years. Rodney Dangerfield was the first big star I ever wrote for in 1980, and he started doing my stuff on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson.
How was that process? Did you just write like joke, and then see which ones you bought into?
Yeah, for Rodney, you had to write pounds of jokes, is what they said. And I used to say to him, "Rodney, look at all the jokes I wrote you." And he goes, "Yeah, Jeff, but they got to be funny, you know?" And, and it was very hard for him to find a joke that he liked because he would do so many jokes. And one of the jokes that he used for his opening line with Johnny Carson, I think he paid me $250 for this one joke. He had a standard opening. He'd say, "I'm all right now, but last week was rough." He says, I bought one of those whirlpools for my bathtub. The first night I used it, I lost 3 of my best ships. And he liked that joke so much. He used it as his opening line with Carson. And when Rodney would do Carson, he couldn't carry on a conversation. He would do jokes in his act, and then he'd do jokes on the couch, and it was my greatest thrill hanging out with Rodney in the club. I'd be in his dressing room. And in recent years, I went back there to perform, and his partner, Tony Bavacqua, who was still there till the end. They opened that club in '69. And Tony said to me, "Jeffrey, I could picture you sitting there with Rodney in the '80s writing jokes together." Right. And Rodney would just tell me jokes, Nothing was politically correct in those days. So the jokes are not
get away with shit, right? You started right? I mean, obviously you've written tons of books, but you also when did you start writing about the comedy scene? Because the first time I met you was at a shitty comedy club down on right next to the Cellar it was filthy downstairs, and you showed up, and I said, "Who the hell's that guy?" And I never saw you before. I heard your name, I didn't see you, and they go, "That's Jeff Gurian." I said, "Oh, no shit." Of course, you left before I went on for the second time, and but you started writing. Someone said, "Yeah, he's a comedian. He's been around a long time." He also, when did you start writing about like the comedy? I don't want to call it the comedy scene. I don't know how you would word it. But.
No, that's what I call it, the comedy scene. It started in 1999. I started with a zine. Somebody asked me, there was a guy named Tim Boxer who had an online magazine, and he said to me, "You know everybody in comedy. Would you consider writing a comedy column for my online magazine?" So I said, "Sure," and I called it Comedy Matters. So I started in 1999, and it's still going. I still do it. But I used to do it. In those days, I was out every night. And then after I left that, it went to another magazine. And then it went
called Intero Bang or something like that?
Yeah, the Interrobang. The Interrobang. I did that for 5 years. That was more recent. That was like 2000, maybe until 2022. So maybe 2017 to 2022. I was
doing that now.
When I was on Sirius XM. Now I do it for myself. It's on my website, on my ComedyMattersTV.com website.
I'll have to check that out for sure.
I cover major comedy events. Like the most recent one I did was the Garden of Laughs. So everyone's on. Bill Burr and Tracy Morgan and all these. Sam Morril came out. Mark Normand. They all came out to support. It's a charity for underprivileged kids. And so I come out and I get invited to cover these major events. It was at Madison Square Garden, and so I've been covering the comedy scene since 1999, more than 20 years.
Yeah, and the comedy scene since 1999. That's about when I started doing stand-up. I was doing sketch comedy with a group called Live on Tape, who got signed by NBC. That went away. I started doing stand-up. And I remember seeing your name on different, buzzing around. So do you have any new books coming out? When's I know you're going to Minnesota to be a keynote speaker here at Shea.
I became a motivational speaker as a result of doing these last 3 books on happiness. And so in September, they gave me.
We're going to have to read your book because me and Dave are 2 miserable bastards sometimes. So we call it bitter Jimmy days at Shea.
Start with this one. It's called Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind, a spiritual and humorous approach to achieving happiness. And it's written by Dr. Jeffrey Gurian.
Jeffrey Gurian wants to talk it over here.
And then I wrote Fight the Fear, Overcoming Obstacles That Stand in Your Way, because we never let fear stop us. And it talks about how I had fear of performing. I'm only performing between 15 and 20 years, but I've been on the comedy scene for 4 decades. So I was nervous to go up on stage because I had written, I didn't want to be a novelty. I didn't want to be like on the Ed Sullivan Show that he had a plate spinner and a knife throwing act. I didn't want to be known as the funny dentist. That Billy Crystal once said that to me. He said, Alan King talks about you as the funny dentist because I was the main writer for the Friars Roast for 12 years. So I got to write Jerry Lewis's roast with him, and what's the guy?
Did you watch the Tom Brady roast?
Sure, I did. Yeah.
What did you think of that?
Well, it was nice to see non-politically correct humor again, and then it's actually up for an Emmy, I know. But when I used to write the roast, I would go up to Bruce Willis was the name I was trying to think of. When I used to write for the roast, I used to go up to the person being honored and I'd say, is there anything about you that you don't want to be talked about? Because I never wanted to hurt anybody's feelings. Because, roasts, like you talk about breaking balls, roasts are really raunchy and you say the most horrible things about people. But these days they've gotten too mean-spirited. And
that was my biggest, first of all, I can't stand Tom Brady as a sports fan, a little patriot, little bastard. And then, he's got kids that are teenagers. I have a teenage daughter, and I even watch some of the stuff I say. And then he goes on, his kids are going to watch that. The kid's got to stroll into school. Talk about taking a beating the next day. I think it's like, hey, Tom, how much money do you need? I think the show's mean-spirited. I think a lot of the comedy's gone that way. It's just mean,
And
without
I
any thought to it.
I hate it, and I say it on every radio show I'm on. I don't believe in it with these roast battles. If someone has cancer, they use that as the joke. If someone's family, if someone died in someone's family, they make fun of that. I think it's terrible.
Me too.
So,
I don't buy into that at all.
So when we did roasts, the motto of the Friars Club was we only roast the ones we love. Jeffrey Ross was great, the roast master general. He used to do all the roasts, and he was amazing. So I never wanted to hurt anybody's feelings with the joke, and I always asked. I said, "Is there anything?" But these days, they try to hurt your feelings, and again, so I'm very much against that. I don't like mean-spirited humor, but after writing for all those well-known people, I was nervous to go on stage. It was a lot of pressure. It was like being Chris Rock's little brother. Like Jordan Rock is a good friend of mine. He's Chris Rock's baby brother, and it had to be very hard for him and Tony Rock to go on stage when your brother is so famous as a comedian. That's how I felt. By the time I was ready to perform, I had written for so many well-known people that there was a lot of pressure on me. And so I finally decided, hey, if you think you're funny, you have to know one way or another. The audience will tell you if you're funny or not. It's one thing to write for somebody. It's another thing to try to convince strangers that what you think is funny is funny. Comedy is such a hard thing to do. So I went up at New York Comedy Club, and I remember Mike Bichetti was in the audience, who's Artie Lang's right hand.
I know Bichetti well.
Yeah, you know Bichetti. And he came over to me and goes, "Jeffrey, you're so funny. You have to keep doing this." And that stuck with me. And I've been performing ever since. So because of the happiness books, the last book I wrote while I was recovering from COVID is called Facing Adversity, Stories of Courage and Inspiration. And it's true stories that I collected over 20 years. I've always been fascinated by people that overcome obstacles. Like my stuttering thing was minor compared to what people...
You have a section on podcasting in that or no?
Well, I'll tell you this. Since I stopped stuttering, you can't even shut me up, which you could tell. I never stopped talking.
I love it.
I have a lot to say. There's never dead air.
You're even good at like not stuttering. There's nothing you don't do well. This is unbelievable.
I'm very determined. So in September, this is important. In September, they gave me a weekend at the Omega Institute for Holistic Studies. It's where Deepak Chopra speaks. And I'm doing a whole weekend from September 20th to the 22nd, calling how to healing your heart with humor. Healing your heart means all the pains from the past. Since we're kids, we hold all the pains from childhood inside of us, all the negative things that have happened to us. Every time someone hurts your feelings or breaks a promise to you or hurts you in a relationship, any kind of pain, we hold it inside of us.
That's why I'm fat. I got so much pain.
Well, we all have reasons for the things. That's right. And it's important to let those things go to achieve happiness. And that's what my first book was about, healing your heart by changing your mind, literally changing the way you think. One of the things that I say is you can't change your past. The only thing you could change is your perspective of your past. It's how you look at the things that happen to you. So it's the reason you could have siblings that are completely different people. And if you ask them about their childhood, you'd think they had different parents because of the way they process what happened to them. And
I believe in that stuff. I was a big fan of the Dale Carnegie How to Win Friends and Influence Others and Stop Worrying book he wrote. I buy into that. I don't always execute it because I could be a miserable bastard, especially on Mondays when the Giants lose. But
inside you're a good man, Jimmy, because you have to be, in order to be able to say that about yourself, it means that you see yourself in a true light. And that's very important, to be able to see who we really are, to be able to evaluate yourself as a human being. Well, so those things are very important to me.
I can't thank you enough coming on. You're keynoting, you're doing stand-up, you write books, you know everything about comedy. My only connection to Woody Allen was my first play was played against Sam from the East Brunswick Playhouse in New Jersey. And also I auditioned for a Woody Allen movie.
Well, I want to commend you too, because you too do a million things. I've read about you and I see all the shows you've been on, the TV shows, the movies and stuff. You've done amazing stuff, Jimmy. So I'm honored to be on with you. That's why I was happy when you invited me on, because I wanted
I always wanted to interview you. After I met you and saw you do stand, I was like, that guy's pretty wild. Well, listen, I appreciate it. Now, Dave will send you some stuff. You can post it on your socials, whatever you got to do.
Yeah, please do.
And I will see you, I'm sure, at a comedy club soon. And maybe I'm going to get some of your books over to Artie Lang. He could use some of that right now.
Yeah, Jeffrey, how can people follow you, Jeff?
They can find me on my website is comedymatterstv.com. On Instagram, I'm at Jeffrey Gurian, Gurian. I never use Jeff, by the way. I always use Jeffrey.
Oh, I call you Jeff. I'm a jerk off. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. You can do it, Jimmy. In case anybody who stutters knows, I have a dedicated website for that. It's stopstutteringNowGurian.com. StopstutteringNowGurian.com. It's got testimonials on it, video testimonials of people that I've helped who stuttered and no longer stutter. And my YouTube channel, if you like comedy, I have over 600 video interviews I've done with everybody from Jimmy Fallon on down, Kevin Hart, D.L. Hughley, Colin Quinn, every big star, Ray Romano. They're all on my channel. It's youtube.com/Comedy Matters TV. And if anybody wants to meet me, I don't even mind giving out my email. It's Jeffrey@JeffreyGurian.com. If you have any questions or you want to reach me about anything, Jeffrey@JeffreyGurian.com. Thank you very much for allowing me to do that. Dave, it was great to meet you, man.
Dr. Jeffrey, I'm going to be official now. I appreciate you coming on. I'm glad you're healthy, and I'm glad you're still kicking ass, and I can't wait to see you at one of these comedy clubs. I'm sure I'll run into you. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks so much. It was an honor to be on with you guys.
You got it, brother. And I'll talk to you soon, my man.
I hope so. Bye-bye now.
All right, we'll see you. All right, wow. Dr. Jeffrey Gurian probably has the most stuff going on that I've ever had. Any guest we've ever had on. Talk about not, what do you call it? Jack of all trades. I mean, he's like all over the place. And a lot of people in comedy know him. And of course, that brings us to ChasingMiracles.com. Of course, Jeffrey Gurian has been ChasingMiracles.com. Stem cell patches, shit your body needs. That's right. I just was on the phone with Donna and Tommy this morning. My mother's having some issues with reordering her stuff. And it was when you combine stem cell patches and my mother and the internet, it is a dangerous combination. She's screaming and yelling, I want my patches. She couldn't order them. Anyway, Donna helped me out. Go to ChasingMiracles.com. These stem cell patches, they work. Energy, better sleep. They're non-invasive. You can pee in the cup here at Shave. And they're a really cool thing. ChasingMiracles.com. Go check it out. Go sign up. God bless America. And don't forget CornholeLevel.com. That's right. CornholeLevel.com. Now, Dave, after that interview, I know you. So if you look at this right here, right there, you hook it right on. Move it around, get the little ball in the middle like a level, and you get the perfect angle according to the Cornhole Sports American Hall of Fame thing. It's the right level. It's perfect. I saw people playing cornhole this weekend. I did not have any on me. I was like, that is not an official board. I wanted to call a timeout and talk it over. CornholeLevel.com. 20% off if you put in JP Show. All right. Well, this week, let's talk about a couple of things. I know we don't have that much time. You got to go, but we could talk about a couple of things. Sad news coming out of the Yankees. I'm devastated. Giancarlo. First of all, he had like a 10-game hitting streak. He was I thought he was doing really well up until at this point. Perfect, batting sixth, end of the lineup there. You still got to pitch to him. He was getting some fastballs. And he gets a hamstring thing. I'm hoping it's not. He's out for 4 to 6 weeks. Yeah, but let's see what happens. I don't know. They say that because I did extensive research, but it looks like, because I was Googling everything. Well, no, tell me the problem with Stanton is he's out a month. That happens. But then it's like 6 weeks to get his swing back. He looks like you playing softball.
My favorite thing is when they're like, he can resume baseball activity after a month. I'm like, wait a minute. They're like, so he's not even going to pick up a baseball? Like, what are we doing here?
So I hope he comes back. The Yankees, listen, They lost 3 series in a row. They're 3-7. Any of you negative, positive Yankee fans out there, if you don't see what I see every night when I watch the game, this team is just not. You know what I feel like the Yankees are? They have 2,000 miles of fuel left, and the runway is 2,500 feet away. It's just they're not going to get there, man. You can see it coming a mile away. They got Clay Holmes stinks. I just think they're going to run out of gas. You just can see it. I think the Yankees, I hope they don't get their ass kicked by the Mets. But that could happen. Mets are playing better ball. They've won.
Garrett Cole's on the mound tonight. I bet the mortgage on the Yankees tonight.
Okay, I could see it. 4th inning, and Cole is limping off. We're not sure. We're going to kick it down to some big, tall blonde who's going to tell us that he's out 6 weeks.
It's Meredith Marakovich. Thank you very much.
I missed the other one. What was the other one's name?
I don't remember the other one.
You don't remember the other one? The big
I've been a
right-hander?
Meredith girl for a long time.
No, Meredith. I love her too. The other one, does football now. Penn State.
Oh, like Erin Andrews?
No. Come on. This is awful. I can't believe I don't know. My brother is going to kill me. She was another blonde. Yankees have big right-handers on the mound.
Oh, Kim Jones?
Kim Jones. This was a while ago. I just, if Cole gets hurt, I mean, this whole thing's going to become unglued. Briefly, NHL, Florida, 7 games, pretty good series. I watched 45 seconds of it. Celtics won the championship. I watched about 3.5 minutes of that. Celtics were the best team all year. They have the best team. They have this guy, a good coach, and they won the championship. I could care less. The Knicks have a million decisions to make. There's contracts. I would not want to be the Knicks GM because you got to make, do you keep Randall, keep this guy, pay that guy, pay that guy? I don't know. You know what? You got to watch the games. Now, I was in Montauk all weekend, and there's a hot club called the Surf Lodge there, Dave. And it is like DJs, but 5 times the size of it, with hot New York, the pretty people place, right? So I'm in the car with my teenage daughter and her 2 friends. And they're like, oh, I want to go in there someday. So I'm like, I could stroll in there, So next thing you know, they're begging me to go in, right? So I stroll in there Sunday night. I have a T-shirt on that says, I'm a cool dad. I look like a boob. I order a $27 bourbon. I'm sipping on it. I'm walking around. I'm looking around like, back in the day, I couldn't hit that pitching when I was 25. I certainly can't.
Where's Natalie in this?
She was. We had Natalie's mother was in. They were in the car. They drove them.
Oh, I thought they were in the car, just like hanging out, waiting for you to finish up your drink.
No. So I wouldn't do that. Leave my kids abandoned on a highway. So So I go in there and they have a little shop next to it where they sell clothes, like in the nightclub that say Surf Lodge and all that shit. So I walk in there and believe me, I look like a grandfather going there. I look like the guy, the grandfather on the Waltons at this point, so I walk in and some girls bouncing around. A bunch of girls are shopping in there. It's the end of the night, right? Place closes early on Sunday nights. Don't know why. And some girl dressed to the nines is like, oh, look at it. We gotta redo your wardrobe. Like, it's insulting. You don't say that to a stranger. She don't know. She doesn't know I'm Johnny Trino from Beer League. And she was 4 when it came out. So I'm sitting there and all of a sudden I look at her and I just said to her, I said, your wardrobe's really nice. As a matter of fact, some girl left that same wardrobe at the end of my bed last night. Well, her friends were like, oh, he just dissed you. It was like a down goes Frazier moment. And I said, all right, time to get out of here. Because there's always, whenever there's hot chicks, there's like a dude floating around. I can see me getting rocked. But then I told the one girl I own the place. And then they thought I was cool. So I just strolled out of there. But I also went to a place called Durier's, which, listen, any guy out there who's going to the Hamptons or Montauk, listen to me very clearly. I can't play anymore. I wasn't that good a player, but I can still coach. I'm telling you right now, go to Durier's. Don't eat there. It'll cost you $5,000 to eat. Go in there, get a Chardonnay or a glass of wine, and just hang out in the area where people wait to be seated. There's a little bar, It's right on the water. It's beautiful. And you got to go in there because it's like recruiting in the SEC. There are deep speed receivers there. I couldn't believe the speed. I was like, oh my, I would have got spun around as a quarterback so fast. I couldn't, all wearing cocktail dresses, all running a 4.2 40. They were big, strong. There was no Moroccovic there. These girls were like, they're like, every girl there was being recruited by Auburn, Georgia. There was no Rutgers there, even though Rutgers been recruiting very well the last week. You got to go to this place. The girls are unbelievable. Only thing is, they look like they're my daughter's age. I felt like a creep looking at some of them, and they were giving me the look like, look at that balding fat fuck. What is he doing here? But it's a really crazy place to go. Anybody, lots of talent in the room. There you go. Dying breed garage here at Shea. Anyway, it was a good time. We had fun bouncing around. I did contact Ralph Macchio, but he's busy shooting Cobra Kai. I was praying that because he lives in Montauk, he has a house there anyway. And I went there once before, but if I went there and with my daughter's friends, if he came out, like I was going to meet him at the end of the driveway just to have, can you imagine if you're a teenage friend and you go with the Palumbo family out to Montauk and Ralph Macchio greets you at the end of his driveway? I would have been talking about being the king, right? They couldn't even believe I was like texting him in the car. They're like, you're texting Ralph Macchio right now? I'm like, of course I played it off. Like, yeah, I talk to Ralph all the time. Of course, you wouldn't do Beer League the series, but also, what else we got here? I know you got to get out of here in a few minutes. Well, as you know, I was ranked number 7 in softball across the nation until I ran into last night. Now,
Giancarlo Stanton getting hurt and Jimmy Palumbo also starting to fall.
It was a combination of, well, wait a minute. It was a combination of Stanton getting hurt, the 3.5-hour ride from Montauk, sitting on my fat ass. And next thing you know, I ran to the ball field. I was not feeling gingerly out there. It was a windy, cold night here in Shea. First time up, I hit a dribbler to short, fielded cleanly, fired across the diamond, one away. Then I drew a walk, which, first of all, I haven't walked in softball since 1993, okay? I don't believe in walks. Walks are for the people, especially early on in the game, walks are for the people who can't hit. And if when I ran a team, if my 2, 3, 4 hitters walked, I'd be pissed. I'm not paying you to walk. I need you to hit a double down the line.
I'm not paying them at all.
And then guys like Craig and Johnine, Craig needs to walk a lot. Of course, he would try to walk and then strike out. Threw Craig under the bus. I love him. So I was 0 for 3, okay, with a walk. My batting average is now .523. I'm 11 for 21 on the year. But here's the scary part. I'll find out Wednesday night. I played second for most of the game. I played 5 innings at second. I had 2 errors. And be honest with you, if I was doing the book, the 3rd error is questionable because here's what happened. Guy hits, it's runner on first. Guy hits a ground ball to third. And third came to second for the force, but he threw it like soft and like, I had to like short hop it, but my glove was there. It hit my glove first, didn't hit the ground first. And I booted it. However, it was on the ground and the guy's running. I see him coming. I just picked up the ball. He's out, force out. But the umpire, 95 yards away, saw me boot it and just called him safe. I was like, Blue, I had the ball in your hand. He's like, not how I saw it. He just said, it's not how I saw it. There's nothing you can say.
Matter of fact, I didn't see it.
Yeah. I was like, but you know what? My rule is, if I should have caught the ball clean. And then we play on this turf, man. And when you get a smash at the turf, it skips. And I got handcuffed on a ball, another error. But then the third and final error, but it really wasn't an error. This guy was hitting rockets, this big lefty. So I played him deep. And he hit instead of hitting a rocket to me, he hit like a slower ground ball. But I was playing like in right field, for Christ's sake. And dude, I caught it clean. I threw it to first. He beat it by 7 steps. He was making the turn, and I was releasing. So anyway, I also went drinking with Pat Volckermer last week in New York City. There is nothing funnier walking into a bar, and Pat's already been there for 2. I told you got to go out with Pat. I walk in, and Pat is friends with the entire bar. And of course, they're all Cowboy fans, which how did he meet Cowboy fans in a New York bar? I walk in and they start cheering for me as I walk in because he was telling them about my podcast. We ended up, A little too much of the grape for Jimmy Palumbo. He went 5 2/3, but it was fun. We had an absolute blast. The last thing is, I want to let everybody know my tomato plants are growing in wonderfully off my deck. My buddy Dave came to water them. He said, "You got to mention on your podcast I have tomato plants." So
that is some riveting shit. I have to say, like next week we need a real big update as to the length and the
I am gonna send photos to you of my plant. We're gonna put it up on the every week. You're gonna see the status of. Listen, if anybody out there grows tomato plants, it becomes. Do you have any tomato plants? Do you have a garden or anything?
No.
Do you like tomatoes? Why don't you grow a few? It's the best thing ever. You're Italian. You got to grow tomatoes. Your dad have them?
My dad hates tomatoes, and he's the biggest Italian I know.
Oh, all right. Well, if he hates tomatoes, then what are you going to do? But if you like a nice sliced tomato, a little mozzarella, a little olive oil, come on. You just want to get a cheeseburger, don't you?
Just a pizza.
You fat bastard. All right. Well, listen, this was a great show here at Shea. We had Dr. Jeffrey Gurian here. That's it. I appreciate you. And next week's show, I think we'll be on at 1. We may be on earlier because I'm heading down to Seagirt for the 4th. But and that's it. That's all I got, Dave. That's all I got.
All right. Well, hey, good night, everybody. I hope you enjoyed Dr. Jeffrey here.
I start off shitty. I end shitty here from the Omni. I can't wait to let everybody know. By the way, I do text Dave during the game. He gets updates. See ESPN updates on my how I'm doing.
I do
in my softball. So I will see you. Pick a ball.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.